All right, since we're doing an NFL show, I figured we may as well start at the very mountaintop here. She's not just Seattle's best, she's as good as it gets and proves it every Mina Kimes show featuring her pal Lenny and on NFL Live. And of course, there are more colors in her rainbow than just pro football. Viewer discretion with David Dennis proves that. Here she is, everybody. It's Lenny's best friend, Mina Kimes. What's happening, sister? How are you? Happy football season.
Dave, I'm a disgusting individual because I am so excited for the preseason. Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, 4 quarters of Shedeur Sanders. How can you not be romantic about football?
I'm excited. I don't want to get bogged down on a sour note right out of the gate. As I've said a million times before, I'll say it for the 1,000,001st here. Preseason football is football's version of Civil War reenactments. They only look real. No, those are the uniforms out there. Except that you don't recognize the name on the back of the jersey, and the running back is wearing number 73. Little things like that are weird. But anyway, I'm with you. I'm excited. Football season is officially here. So let's jump into it, shall we? First of all, we were just playing a little bit of what the if transactions. As you may have heard, a number of big name guys are out there trying to get dealt or have requested trades and otherwise. So let's assume that the contracts are as they actually exist as we speak here. Raiders quarterback Geno Smith in exchange for Steelers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Does either side quibble at the mention of that offer?
Well, if I was the Raiders, I wouldn't do it. I remain confused that the Steelers didn't. I heard zero. You're more plugged than I am to that organization. I heard zero reports of them asking about Geno Smith. If the
Mysterious.
Steelers, Geno Smith on the Steelers would be really interesting. So I think that was a mistake not to consider him. I get a lot of flack for being too positive about Geno Smith, and I understand he has his critics, and there are people who think he's maybe more mid than where I have him, which is fringe top 10. Just outside, probably. But I think he is to me, Gardner Minshew / Aiden O'Connell to Geno Smith is the single biggest quarterback upgrade in football this year. Do you agree?
Biggest upgrade. I think that sounds right without having all the changes in front of me. But yeah, off the top of my head, it does. Although I certainly think that the Jets starting quarterback this year would have been a better option this year, if only because, not to say I think Justin Fields is a superior quarterback to Aaron Rodgers, even though Aaron Rodgers is 41. And as I continually say, there's very little evidence of guys thriving no matter how good they've been and whether or not they're destined for the Hall of Fame. Once they transcend 40, there's very little evidence of those guys being the difference maker in a positive way for their team. Justin Fields, like Geno Smith, the primary virtue in my book is if you are in fact intent on landing the guy in the draft in 2026, what you wanted was a bridge quarterback. I know Aaron Rodgers does that, but as I keep saying, I don't think Mike Tomlin saw sinners, because the primary message of that was do not invite the vampire who wants to suck the life out of your organization and turn it into his culture. And we're already hearing noise about Aaron Rodgers is dabbling with the offense. Arthur Smith is cool with it, everybody. Oh yeah. Wow. Here we go. Alan Lazard next. We'll be on the lookout for that signing. More Steelers to come in a second here. As we play the little what if here, I think this is an interesting one because the confusion that exists among the football world where Brock Purdy is concerned. He's good, but he looks like a boy. I think that's strike one in terms of perception. Obviously, he's Mr. Irrelevant. That's the other one. No matter what Tom Brady did as a 6th round pick, people are still going to be skeptical of that. But also, I think practically, Brock Purdy's talents don't seem transferable. Obviously, if the Bills were if the Niners were offered Josh Allen for Brock Purdy, there would not be a question there. The Bills would never make that trade. The Ravens would never consider trading Lamar Jackson. And so it goes. So I think this is an interesting way to sort of color in how it's not the answer to everything if his talent is transferable, but I do think how low do you go in the quarterback rankings before you get a satisfactory comp for Brock Purdy?
I have him in the 10 to 15 range, maybe like a little bit towards the lower part of that. What's so tricky about stacking quarterbacks in that area is you're kind of weighing upside versus floor. Yeah, a quarterback like Kyler Murray to me is the hardest to rank because there are games where he looks like a world beater, and then there are stretches of inconsistent play. You don't really get that with Brock Purdy. I would say Jared Goff is a player who I would put very close to Purdy, very similar in some ways. You know that he sets a floor for the offense, and that if things are good, if the line is good, if you got some good skill players in there, you can call a top 5 offense. Those two offenses have been, but I think there's skepticism correctly about whether either of them are elevators the way certainly guys in the top 5, 6 are, and then outside the top 6, you have guys who have like flashes of being that.
Mike behind the glass there said this to me the other day. I said, I ride at this point over the last couple of NFL seasons, and you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past, is in a lot of NFL situations, the play caller, the clever offensive mind has outstripped the value of the guy at the trigger. I think I would rather have Kyle Shanahan, where I am a Niners fan, than I would Brock Purdy. I would definitely rather have Ben Johnson than I would Jared Goff. And I think Lions fans are going to find that out over the course of the next, 3-4 months here. Do you think that, and Mike pointed out to me, he said, I believe what Kyle Shanahan believes. And if he decided we must keep Brock Purdy, then I'll ride with what Shanny says. And Mike rightly pointed out, yeah, that's the guy who also desperately needed to have Trey Lance. So I don't know if anybody is 100% trustworthy. But do you buy that the Niners, after their little redshirt season owed to injury and otherwise, questions about the offensive line and otherwise, do you believe that the Niners are a real contender here? I, by the way, should mention, I just made them my Super Bowl pick to play the Buffalo Bills in Super Bowl 60.
I think they could absolutely win the NFC West, which I view as wide open. So start there. They have the easiest schedule in football. They were the most injured team in football last year. That's statistically very unlikely to happen again. Even last year with all of the injuries, they still had like a top 10 offense in a lot of metrics. I was impressed by Purdy's play in pretty adverse circumstances.
Me too. Right.
If I have skepticism around the Niners, it's actually not about the offense. I don't like the look of that secondary right now. I was looking at it, the depth chart. I think there's some holes on the back end. But I like the return of Robert Saleh a lot. I think that's a stabilizing force.
One of the more underrated moves of the offseason. Right.
So, yeah, I think they could. And then, with the NFC, I think after the Eagles, it's just a glut. I don't think there's a clear number 2 team in the NFC at all.
Like just about everybody else, I was all about the Rams, but the Stafford back news, and you talk about older QBs and all of that, things now suddenly are murky there for one half of Los Angeles pro football. All right, I just told you my Super Bowl 60 pick. I texted you in advance of this and asked you for 2 Super Bowl picks, the first of which is the one that you think is actually going to happen. And to make it a little bit more fun, since I know you're a big Pavement fan, do you remember who you told me? I don't know if it's something that bounces around in your head.
You asked me
actually
and most fun. I remember. Yeah.
Okay. What was your actual Super Bowl 60 matchup?
I believe I went with the 2 best teams in the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens.
All right. Let's see it represented as a Pavement album. Here we go. There it is. Beautiful. Slanted and Enchanted. The first one up there. I have to say, I like this exercise. And by the way, the Czech Republic is strong. Thanks to our pal Los for sending that one over to us. We welcome, encourage all listeners, football Americans, to join the conversation. Okay, so justify that. The Ravens, you just said it. Now justify it a little bit.
Sure.
We know why you say the Eagles, obviously. Yeah. But talk about the Ravens in a conference that still includes the Chiefs and the Bills.
Ravens are stacked. Okay, so if you're looking at the top of the AFC and you have, I think correctly, the Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens, right? Bengals are kind of outside of that because of their defense. In my mind, the Ravens clearly have the best defense of the bunch. I think they have a top 3-4 defense that was really repaired. They really fixed things in the second half of last season. I think they're going to be even better this year.
It's wild that just mid-season they were being had, and I was saying halfway through the season last year, are you guys watching the games though? I know Lamar Jackson's super fun and everything, but they can't stop anybody when they have to stop somebody. Then suddenly they moved Kyle Hamilton and they were a completely different team. Now they doubled down at the safety spot.
Added a Jair Alexander. We'll see how much he plays, but yeah, I'm pretty high on that Ravens defense, Ravens offense. Listen, we can talk about, the postseason and some of the foibles and the execution errors that they seem to have.
We should talk about the postseason, Mina. I know you don't like a quarterback wins in the postseason as something that matters, but it matters. Me and Nick Wright agree.
They're the best team. I really believe that they're the best team in the AFC. The offense is basically the same.
Yeah.
I think the play callers are so good. Todd Monken, to me, is like one of the great NFL stories. So the thing about the postseason is you can't. Once we get there, we can say who's injured, what are the matchups like, etc. But this time of year, all you could really do is just try to pick the two best teams, and I really believe those are the two best teams in football.
I think the Bills and the Ravens, and to probably a large extent the Chiefs, are all in this weird 4-month pregnancy where obviously they can't just fall on their faces, but assuming that they get to the postseason, that's all we're waiting for any of those three teams. And it's a weird state to assume as a fan of those teams. It surely's got to be weird for the QBs. Josh Allen said it on Hard Knocks and elsewhere. What matters at this point, except how he plays in those very limited sample sizes? That's the drama. Don't you see? That's why it's great. That's what makes it the most fun. It all is leading to this postseason. I don't want to get caught up in that. Let's move on to your heart pick, aka the one that you think would provide the most narratives for us to buzz about for a fortnight long, the most fun, the one that most of America would be the most excited to watch.
I went with Bills Lions for the heart pick. There's obvious reasons, right? Tortured fan bases to different degrees, teams that have come so close in recent years, knocking on the door, teams that are right there at the top of their respective conferences. I think the Lions are kind of still America's sweethearts, but there is a bit of an expiration date on that, right? Like you can only kind of get so close for so long. So I feel like this year, if they were able to get over the hump, it would just be an amazing story and people would really rally behind them.
A lot of teams out there are trying to, in the copycat league, adopt that Eagles model, and the Lions are really in a lot of ways similar, a couple of years behind that, physical, built at the line of scrimmage and all of that, and beat the hell out of their foes. I refer you to what happened to the Eagles in the in-between Super Bowl years there. Yeah. The loss of those two coordinators, it wasn't day one that it happened. It was slow. It was a slow-moving wreck for that in-between team with the Eagles. I have a hunch that that's what's going to happen to these Lions. How say you?
My feeling is offensively, there is going to be some regression because the combination of losing Ben Johnson and the interior offensive line kind of turning over. But my hope is that that'll be mitigated by better defensive. This is the most injured defense in football last season. I think that they got better. I think they added talent. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson returning is huge, but they also added players in the secondary, first-round draft pick on the defensive line. So I wouldn't be. I actually had this as a top 10 defense when I did my top 10 defenses pod. And so my feeling is if the offense takes a step back, the defense could take a step forward that kind of nets them out.
Yeah, I hear you. I am concerned also about a team that's built on beating the hell out of their foes, losing what they've lost on the offensive line, too. Hey, by the way, everybody would say about a Bills-Lions Super Bowl, what would they say? They'd say, wowie zowie, right? Isn't that what they would say, everybody? Let's see it. There we go. See? Dan Campbell, Josh Allen.
Oh,
in
wow.
the Super Bowl.
Look at that. I could never.
But, I think you could. You could do it on an Etch-a-Sketch, as a matter of fact. I'll throw one more at you. Let's go brighten the corners here with Dave's optimistic pick. And I know what you're going to say when you see it. I'm going with the Green Bay Packers against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't say that as a Steelers fan. I say that what would be more fascinating, what would be more compelling to buzz about for 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah.
Than Jordan Love and company, Guten Kuntz and everybody like, oh, Aaron. I see more people that people did end up coming to Green Bay even after you left, despite your proclamations that no one wanted to come here without you being here. I think that's fun. Let's see that one real quick. There it
is. This. Wow, look at that. This is an amazing storyline. I agree. I'm pretty dubious of it. But let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
So you guys the Steelers don't have the Packers during the season, right?
They do. In Lambeau. In Lambeau, no less.
Who are you going to pick
how about
right
this?
now?
Before that happens, the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1 play Justin Fields and the Jets in New York. The big question is Aaron going to run out there with the U.S. flag again?
Do you think, okay, who are you going to pick week 1? And okay,
I'm going to take Pittsburgh because, I mean, for real, I know 16 games after that one and they can lose it and all that. But for real, if they lost that game with this new look team, I don't know if you heard, Mike Tomlin never seeks comfort, but that is what this season is all about. Seeking comfort in football terms, it is winning a playoff game. I know the buzz is now we're on track now. Maybe this team could make the Super Bowl. Spoiler alert, this team is not making the Super Bowl. They're not going through unless they're the number 1 seed, which I don't see a path to them getting. They're not going to win 3 games in January against these high-end heavyweights that they're going to have to go up against. I think that the defense has a chance to be mighty. I think the Texans, I think the Broncos, I mean, the defense, the Chargers statistically last season were great. The AFC story could kind of shift here away from the superhero QBs, Joe Burrow's Bengals notwithstanding, and defense could kind of carry the day here. The question I have about Mike Tomlin is, and this sounds snarky, but it's sincere. Kyle Shanahan is an offensive guru, and he has proven that by going to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. And, you've expressed minor skepticism even about Brock Purdy. So Shanny has those. And Matt Ryan's best season MVP obviously lands in the Super Bowl there when he's the Falcons OC and so on. Mike Tomlin is supposed to be a defensive whiz, specifically in the secondary. So explain to me why he needs so many expensive pieces for that defense to work. Kyle Shanahan prefers to have Christian McCaffrey back there. He prefers to have Brandon Ayuk and otherwise, but he makes it work with whomever he is handed. Why do you suppose that for this to work? I mean, because the defense in December is what failed the Steelers. As much as I was down on Russell Wilson, it was the defense that let that team down.
I think it's a large part because the bar for the Steelers defense is to be optimistic about this team, not just making it to the playoffs, but winning a playoff game. The world in which that happens, in my mind, is one where they're much better running the football, so the offense isn't leaning heavily on Aaron Rodgers. And then the defense is a top 6 unit. I feel confident that this defense will be at minimum top 11, 12, right? And
there's some intrigue added on Thursday by Cam Hayward having a quiet hold-in, apparently not practicing as much as he could. I mean, assuming that, by the way, Mina Kimes, I should say, you should listen to what she says when she forecasts. She was the first national voice to say that guy's going to the Hall of Fame. I don't know what the holdup is with the nation not acknowledging that. So you're right about that. But yes, so but I mean, again, Cam Hayward, future Hall of Fame, TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick for the last half decade, and it equaled 0 playoff wins. You can understand why a Steelers fan might be skeptical.
No, I get it. The problem with the playoff thing, and I think the Steelers defense in general, is that they have a huge Baltimore Ravens sized problem. And they happen to play in the same division as the Baltimore Ravens. I mentioned this we did an AFC North preview, actually the first preview I did. Steelers fans, go check it out. And Mina Kimes featuring Lenny, you can find on YouTube.
Your stuff, your power rankings, and you did them several times over with some of our favorites. I mentioned Nick Wright, Chris Long, and otherwise. A fantastic series to get you right for kickoff.
So one thing I looked up was the Steelers' run defense. If you take out the Ravens games, it was actually excellent. But then the Ravens games were just so atrocious. it dragged the whole thing down. And I think they really struggle. It's not just, the Ravens are, strong and they have Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. All of the things that the Ravens do with motion in particular, they were just toying with the Steelers defense. And I think if I have a criticism for Tomlin and Austin and just the staff, it feels like those really modern, sophisticated offenses with lots of motion and moving parts and different personnel groupings are able to get the best of them. And so when you go to the playoffs, you're more likely to run into those types of offenses. And that has to get fixed this year. Will it be? I don't know. You really need Patrick Queen to step up. I think he's a key player in that regard.
Agree.
But so to kind of go back to your original question, this offense has a floor, or defense, pardon me, of being just outside the top 10 of offenses. The question to me is, can they hit their ceiling with the talent that they have on their roster?
Well, another concern, and I'm sorry, I don't want to turn this into a Steelers conversation entirely, just 95% of it, if we could do that, is the big question, the X factor for the Steelers is Broderick Jones, their first round draft pick of a couple of seasons ago. He hasn't really developed. You can ask questions about Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach, and why that he has not developed with that high pedigree. If he lives up to that pedigree, this offense should be real good, specifically banging the ball. They should be able to really, with Arthur Smith's offense. Here's my concern, though. Tell me what you think about the idea, first of all, of Arthur Smith, who it's been a minute since he had a high-end offense. People always point back to the Ryan Tannehill Titans, but that was not a couple months ago at this point. It was a while ago. I am vexed by teams, and now it includes the Steelers, who lean too hard into what their coordinator needs to make his offense work. Or there's in success, well, then you leave. Right. Well, right.
Once we get Jonnu Smith, it's curtains for y'all.
Yeah. Well, the overreaction to the addition of Jonnu Smith did make me laugh. But where do you come down on? That was a big Greg Williams thing. He needs these pieces for his. Well, but if it works, he's going to leave. So now what have you done? Now you're left holding the bag of that contract because the coordinator had to have that guy.
I think it's similar to what I was saying about Tomlin, which is I think if you're a really great coach, you should be able to hit a floor that's above average, regardless of whether or not you have the exact right players for your offense. I think it's reasonable to say for the offensive coordinator or play caller to hit a ceiling, he needs X, Y, Z. That makes sense to me. The ability to put the stamp, line in particular, offensive line. Like I never forget offensive play caller explaining to me the first time that when the team lost two of their starters on the offensive line, he had to throw out half the playbook. And I think about that all the time. The offensive line outside the quarterback, it just so dramatically affects what you can do if you can't get above average or average play. So I think it's reasonable, again, to go back to Smith and say, well, they didn't run the ball that great last year, but can we put some of that on the line? I think it's totally reasonable. But you're in year 3, you drafted the exact back he wanted, who's a perfect scheme fit, reshuffle the decks on the line. At a certain point, the play caller starts bearing a little bit more responsibility if it doesn't improve.
Grandpappy Archie Manning has now weighed in on where Arch is going to be in 2026. In the meantime, I could not get over the Saints drafting Tyler Shuck, who I like, by the way.
Yeah.
All you have to do, maybe I care more about the sentimentality and the narratives and all of that than people who are studying strict X's and O's and the analytics. But if you're the New Orleans Saints, I went to New Orleans a couple of times right around Katrina, and then, as it happened, that Super Bowl victory. And what it meant, and it wasn't just in that moment, the Saints, there are certain football towns that are tied to their team in a deeper way than other towns are to theirs. And the Saints mean a great deal to the city and to the region, to the bayou there. The opportunity, when you know you're not going to be good anyway, it's not like, maybe with Tyler Shuck, we make it. You know the Saints aren't winning the Super Bowl. Don't you think this was a major spiritual mistake to not say, we don't want to go 0-17, but 1-16 will be okay if it gets us Arch. And by the way, If the New Orleans Saints have the first overall pick, I don't care what Archie says. Well, he's going back to Texas no matter what. You're one of the Mannings. You're worth roughly $1.5 billion. You don't need the complete school, Arch. You're definitely going to try to make it with the Saints, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting move too for a team that just got off the Derek Carr ride, because he's kind of arguably one of the more successful second round quarterbacks of all time, and that's really rare, as you know, to hit on one. Like, if Tyler Sheck has Derek Carr's career, the pick is an unmitigated success, in my opinion. Because, yeah,
right.
A first round pick could end up being, Joe Burrow, but it could also end up being insert all of the other first rounders who have failed in recent years. I think the situation you fear as a Saints fan is that he's just good enough to win a few games and keep you out of next year's draft, or make it life harder for you in terms of going up and getting one. The problem is that might be the most likely outcome. So yeah, I didn't quite understand the thinking there, but teams don't take, man. Just
most don't. Yeah, most don't. And I don't advocate generally for taking. There are special circumstances I supported as a wee lad in 1984, my favorite hockey team taking to get the greatest guy who ended up being the greatest hockey player in the history of people. If you're the Saints in NOLA, you wait, you try to do whatever you can to get Archie Manning's son and complete that oblong circle that started back in 1970 or whenever it was. All right, here's another question closer to you. As you cover football, I say you're the best in the business. I am not being hyperbolic. I think you are modest, but that is in fact the case. And by the way, as somebody in the position that you are in, a lot of people would pull the ladder up. That is the opposite of Mina Kimes. I always like to let everybody know who the good people are in this business. Mina Kimes is one. I can see that you are always looking out for people, trying to pull people up to join you on your high perch there. And
thank you.
I appreciate it. And you've been nothing but kind to me, obviously, as well. So now, ESPN and the NFL are merging, and I'm curious for your thoughts on that, because of course Jimmy Pitaro and Don Van Natta say, like, of course it's not going to impact our journalistic integrity. You are an accomplished writer on top of everything else. Where do you come down on this?
Well, selfish, just speaking from my own perspective, I think my job is just going to be the same, right? I would say the last few years, what I've been doing is just about 95% of what I do at ESPN is just talk about the sport and just, I think, celebrate it because I take it seriously and love it so much. And then the other 5%, sometimes I'll branch out into talking about social issues around the sport, being critical of the league when it calls for it. I think I've picked, I've always felt the importance of that in not just, we said the league, but I'm talking about individual owners. That's primarily, frankly, more so than the league itself in recent years. I expect that to continue. Honestly, I have never gotten pushback, honestly, when I've spoken out about those things. But it is a relatively small part of what I do, since most of my job is just watching the games and talking about them. I
hear you. And, Don Van Natta has a different profile than I have. For what it's worth, I did graduate Ernie Pyle School of Journalism at Indiana University. And so I am proud of my bona fides, or bona fides, however you want to say it. And I will also say, to a more extreme degree, my role has always been professionally to have fun talking about football. That's the main point there. And that's why I am the guy who would go to Super Bowls and ask the players, is this a must-win game? To sort of satirize the people who are overly serious.
One of the best bits of all time.
Well, the point is to make fun of the people who take it a little bit too seriously. And I do kind of hearken back to, I can devil's damashek the need for hardcore journalism. Obviously, if concussions are a plague on the profession, that needs a deep dive and some honesty, some raw truth applied to it. But for the most part, I also kind of think about from the Supreme Court what Warren said forever ago of the saw about I go to the sports page to see man's successes and I go to the front page to see his failures. And it is funny, right around the turn of the millennium, that's when football, when sports in general got sort of the Us Weekly people treatment a little bit more. And I don't know that we're better off for that. I mean, I don't know that and coincidentally or not, Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali and Bill Russell and all the rest of them, that was before it sort of bled into a sort of incorporated, like, hey, let's put words in the end zone to show that we're all behind this as an industry, when it was more of an individual statement. And then the other side of that is I'm sorry, I'm all over the place and I don't mean to monologue at you about this, but I also then think about when the Colin Kaepernick taking a knee thing was really hitting in a big way, and I would talk about it on my show, I was called in by bosses and said, stop talking about the Colin Kaepernick knee thing. And I said, it's the biggest story in football right now. And they said, no one cares what you think about that. That's the kind of stuff that happens. It's, it's not formal, threatening, or anything else. It's just like, don't talk. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what you think. I think that we're ignoring empirical reality with that kind of stuff. And I do think, I don't know that it gets to you, but that does happen, right?
People always think that happens at ESPN, and I swear I'm not being a company woman when I'm telling the truth. I've always been given editorial independence. Back when I was a writer, my earliest columns at ESPN the magazine were about Ray Rice and how the NFL failed there. I wrote about Roger Goodell's salary and why it was so high one year. I wrote about NFL ratings and I certainly wrote about Kaepernick. And I think, as I've continued and instead of writing about those things, occasionally used my TV platform, whether it's criticizing Dan Snyder, Jerry Richardson, or the NFL's kind of gotten its act together with regards to the suspensions compared to back then. But certain moments like that, figuring out what's going on with Deshaun Watson and criticizing the league, honestly, I've always felt like I've had just the freedom to say what I really believed, as long as it was thoughtful. And I think that's what I've always tried to do is, I think if I was talking about football, maybe I speak a little bit more off the cuff, but if I'm talking about something I think is kind of bigger than that, I've always tried to really make sure I said things in a correct way. I can't tell you what the future holds. I can only speak to what my life has been, my work life has been thus far, but thus far I've felt good. I felt proud. You do break through as a three-dimensional human being when a lot of people don't, and specific to football, you care about the analytics, deeply the X's and O's because it's clear you're doing watching the film and all the rest of it, and then you understand it as a fan does. Speaking of fans, I won't hold you up much longer here, but Mike, big fan behind the glass, has a question for you.
Yeah. So hey, Mina, how you doing?
Hey.
So the loyalty's been a big thing this offseason. We see what's happening with Micah, Scary Terry, Hendrickson over with the Bengals. And, there's a little question lately, too, about Geno. I know he might have got too expensive for Seattle. But my real question about loyalty is, do you think Brian and Amaya have the loyalty capable of staying together now that they're outside the villa and have already split the prize money?
I think that first of all, great question. Thank you so much. I think that they got to stay together for the reunion, which is August 25th. Okay. And I think all of the couples thus far have stayed together, by the way, from this season. I don't want to question true love, but there is certainly a strong financial incentive for all of them to continue co-branding, so to speak. So
Nick and Olandria are very busy. Nick and Olandria are very busy on the Instagram, I've noticed.
Posting. Yes. And I think we'll see. I think they'll all still be together for the reunion. After that, though, all bets are off.
Fair.
All right. Good answer. Good question there, Mike. Thank you for that one. I have one main question left for you. I mentioned the progressive offensive mind and how essential it is in pretty much every NFL situation at this point. So, given that that's the case, and I think Jalen Hurts is certainly comfortably a top 10 quarterback. There's been a lot of discussion around that. By the way, choose your Jalen. I I have a feeling that they might prefer to keep Carter over Hurts. That's a conversation for another time. If you absolutely could only keep one of those guys, I'm not sure which they would choose. But amidst this world of progressive offenses, explain Nick Sirianni. This team has been in 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. They almost beat the Chiefs once. Then they did beat the Chiefs a second time. And in between, Nick Sirianni was fighting with his own fans and almost getting fired at least, it seemed like, a couple of times. How did this happen? All we hear about is, you got to get Ben Johnson, or unless it's Kyle Shanahan. Yeah. But Andy Reid's still the best. Nick Sirianni? What?
Howie Roseman is the answer. When you're the best drafting team in football, when you've made outstanding free agent acquisitions like your Zach Bonds, right? Trading for A.J. Brown. It's a lot easier for everybody involved, certainly the coaching staff. And I think Nick Sirianni is actually there's specific things I think he's good at. I think he's good on the game management stuff. I really do. I think he's a good manager of people. I think being swift with the decisions and the coordinators, and then the humility to make those kinds of changes and he demoted himself at one point. That's not something you take for granted. I mean, John Harbaugh has similar traits. But yeah, it was hard. I did a top 10 coaches rankings, and we had to put him in the top 10.
I mean, how can't you? It doesn't make any sense.
The last 3 years. Yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy.
And he lost both coordinators as we started out with. It was like, well, obviously he's been exposed. Those were the guys who were really running things. And then to get back to the Super Bowl the following year. Before I let you go, one last thing. I'm sorry. Because you have something in common with Gino's wife, and we love to wear our fandom on our sleeve on this show. Gino, take it away.
Hi, Mina. So,
hi.
My wife lived in Seattle for 8 years before I met her, and we ultimately got married. She's a diehard Seahawks fan. I would never hear the end of it if I didn't ask what she has to look forward to this season, and what part of the team in Seattle you're most excited about this year.
The defense, man. The defense is gonna slap. That's I'm unambiguously excited to watch this defense. In the second half of last season, they were extraordinary. Top 5 unit, most metrics. So throughout the course of the season, by the way, they led the league in forcing 3 and outs. Mike McDonald, the defensive, minded head coach, has shown the ability to improve his units year over year, half of the year over first half of the year. He did it in Baltimore. And I expect that to continue. I mean, those guys are really well coached. The Seahawks defense is funny too, because Dave, they don't have a TJ Watt or, an obvious superstar. They just have a lot of really good players across the board. Leo Williams is so good. I feel like people don't talk about him enough. But there's no holes. There's really, really good players, and there's a really brilliant defensive coach calling it. So I'm very excited about the Seahawks defense. Offense, another story.
I just have to work in very quickly, since this is our first show, and a minor thing, but the Fangio effect on Philly, I think that could happen in Indy. Anarumo was the guy, and people didn't talk about that much when they didn't have a ton of high-end pieces in Cincy. They still were able to make it. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that with Latu and Abukam, and Buckner is 98 years old. But
he's still so good. I posted this about, who was I talking about? Who was third in pass rush win? Somebody who just got paid. Now it escapes me.
It's funny, that defensive interior guy, old man strength, rules the day.
Freaking Cam Hayward. He's still one of the best defensive linemen in football. But yes, it was Zach Allen who I posted that about. But I was I posted the stat that Zach Allen was third. First was Chris Jones, who's old, right? And then second was DeForest Buckner. That dude's still plugging away. One of the best pass rushing 3 techs in football. And then they also gave Lou some players on the back end, signing Javarius Ward and Cam Bynum. Because I think, in Cincinnati, it just got too young. And I think he is better with older players. So I like that the Colts went out and they got him some talent in the secondary.
Every QB's journey is not the same. Every guy does not hit the floor running. The idea that young Anthony Richardson is a bust at this point. There's time, if he turns it around.
This is coming out to where the game is going to be played. So
I know, and I'm letting you go. I just thought I like talking about football. No.
I just don't want us to be like, Anthony Richardson, man, I still believe. And then they're going to listening to this after he goes 2 for 20 or something. I don't know.
You're right. You go. Get ready for football. It is upon us. And the best way to enjoy it is with Mina Kimes in your ears because she has pretty much every aspect, as I think she just proved here in our conversation. Lockdown. We appreciate you, Mina Kimes. Thank you so much for making our first episode feel a little special.
It's so exciting. Congrats on the new show to all of you. I'll be sure to subscribe, and hopefully you guys can have me back on sometime.
Oh, yeah. Next week?
Maybe next week.
Okay, I'll be in touch. Thank you, Mina Kimes.